It will give you eyes, give you hope, it'll give you perspective. Oh, there are stories to tell, the times we grew and the times we fell. Oh, I've been afraid some days, but the road will lead us to a better place. Road will lead us to a better place.
My Valley Home with Rachel MacLean is made possible through the generous support of our sponsors, including Deacon Financial Management Group of Scotia Wealth Management.
In this episode, we visit Grand-Pré, where we'll learn about the UNESCO World Heritage Site, visit the Deportation Cross, and take a tour of the National Historic Site with our new friends from Louisiana.
We're going to spend the day today in Grand-Pré, and I thought what better way to begin the day than to be here at the UNESCO World Heritage Site in Grand-Pré. And the wonderful Claude Degrasse agreed kindly to come and speak with us. So we are so happy. Thank you so much for meeting us.
Pleased to be here.
It's absolutely
Beautiful
gorgeous.
day.
And when we turn around and see that view, how could anyone not be completely in love with that? I love it. I love it. Can you explain, just what UNESCO means?
Well, UNESCO recognizes the sites which are of importance to humanity as a whole. And it's based on criteria that we have to meet. There's 10 criteria, and Grand-Pré was inscribed because of the land, the agricultural land that was created by the Acadians using the aboiteau system, using the system of aboiteau of dikes to make sure that the water from this land above the agricultural land was able to drain through the dike lands and up to the Minas Basin.
When the Acadians arrive, they take a look. And on the higher lands, they notice everything is hilly and everything is covered in forests. And they think that's probably pretty difficult to work with. And they take a look at the lowlands, which are on the Bay of Fundy, and they find, okay, for 6 hours, everything is underwater. And 6 hours later, there's no water at all. So they bring a piece of technology from Europe called a dike wall, which is a big wall made out of mud bricks. The issue is, with all the rain and snow in Nova Scotia, if you just create a wall around an area, you're going to make a lake instead of making the ocean. And so the Acadians have this issue of how do we make it so that no salt water can come in, but excess water can leave. And so they invent something new that they call an aboiteau. This would be a tree that the Acadians would cut down, and then when they're ready to go, they would hollow the tree out. And once they've hollowed their tree, they would cut a little notch in the wood. On that notch, they would put a one-way door known as a clapet. This means that when the Bay of Fundy is at high tide, the door will be pushed shut. It cannot open. 6 hours later, when the tide goes back down, anything can push the other side and open that door. Now, when the Acadians are looking at their farming land, they notice that there's rivers cut in the land naturally. And so where the river is going to touch the ocean, the Acadians will put an aboiteau. This way, when the tide is high, the door is shut. Any rain or any snow that falls on the farming land will stay on the farming land. 6 hours later, when the tide has gone back down to low tide, the river can push the door open and let any excess water out. And so the dike wall will be completed when the aboiteau is done. So when the aboiteau is ready to go, the Acadians will put wooden planks, essentially, across the top to cover this thing up and turn it back into a pipe. Then it would be placed with the river on the inside and the ocean on the outside, and then the dike wall would be built on top of it. So now you have a complete wall system, and the aboiteau will stop any salt water from coming in and let any excess rainfall or snowfall out. This way, the land can be irrigated all by itself, and the Acadians really only have to worry about maintaining the dike wall itself. There's enough rain and enough snow that falls that can irrigate the land here.
So that took a lot of ingenuity, and so that was recognized. Traditional farming settlement, community-based agriculture which is still used today more or less the same way. I mean, the technology has evolved, but basically we have the marsh body, which is an assembly of all the farmers basically that manage the dikelands with the province of Nova Scotia. So, and the other reason is the lieu de mémoire, the site of memory for the Acadian people, the diaspora, the Acadian diaspora from around the world.
Wow. It's fascinating. You worked. It's quite a process. It's not just you don't just ask for it to be done and it's done.
No,
it's quite a lengthy process.
It's quite a lengthy process, and the process involved first engaging all the communities, so the Mi'kmaq community, the local community of Grand-Pré and area, the farming community, the marsh body, and then we had the Acadian community. And all levels of government were involved, and it was a lengthy process because to be considered, you have to have outstanding universal value, and that value has to be defined by the criteria that are pre-established by UNESCO. The main inscription includes about 13 square kilometers. There's Parks Canada owns this property we're on now in the National Historic Site, which forms a small part of the total site. And so it includes all the dikelands, the 3,000 acres. It includes about 8 kilometers of dike walls. And so all the land we see behind us up to North Grand-Pré or Long Island is part of the landscape. And then we have a buffer zone which goes to the Gaspereau River and all the way to Cape Blomidon behind us. So UNESCO recognized that the view from here to Cape Blomidon was significant as well. So the protection of that view is there. So and also the view from Horton Landing to Blomidon was deemed to be significant and was recognized to be something that should be preserved.
That is wonderful. That's truly wonderful. Thank you so much, Claude, for coming and explaining a lot of this. I feel like I have a much greater appreciation for this, not just a pretty view. It's not just a pretty face anymore.
I agree. I mean, I'm learning every day. I mean, I'm learning, there's different aspects that, like before the UNESCO inscription, the Acadians were more focused on the church and the deportation and all that. So the UNESCO inscription permits us to have a much broader appreciation of the treasure we have in the Annapolis Valley.
In researching the area for this episode, we reached out to Acadia Memorial in Louisiana, and we were so fortunate to get in touch with Brenda and her husband Ray. We were hoping for a Zoom call, but we got much more than that. We actually have them physically here with us, which is very exciting. We're here at the Deportation Cross, and we just want to learn what the connection is between the Acadians of Nova Scotia and the Acadians from Lafayette, which is where you're from, correct? Yes.
Thank you. We're happy to be here too.
So can you tell us, how it feels? I know that you've discovered so much about your own history and how special and important that is. But the culture, how much of that were you able to maintain? And what did you maintain?
Well, when I look at the registers at the church in Grand-Pré, I see approximately 7 people with the same last name, which is Trahan. And it feels like when I'm at Grand-Pré, on the grounds of Grand-Pré, I feel like I'm back at home again. But when I do come here, it's nice to see the area, especially the Deportation Cross, but I feel a little more cold chill when I come to this property here, because we know that our ancestors, possibly those 7 people there in that register, were deported from this area here. Yes. So it's always nice to come back and visit the area. But in Louisiana, we have saved our French language. So I'm fortunate that I can still speak my French language thanks to both my parents who helped me with that.
And that French has lasted 400 years. And that's a pride that we have. And a lot of people that are our age, when we die, it may not be preserved. And it was the same thing that happened with the Acadians when they got on these boats. When they arrived in New Orleans, they spoke French, and they were so happy that there was going to be a government from France. and there was going to be a flag for them. And a lot of the people that got off the boats, they touched the soil and they danced a jig. And that's recorded.
Oh, wow.
And they suffered there too. They were shamed by the Maricans, is that's how my daddy would call the American people that lived around us. I grew up, I was on a farm, and my dad had to be a sharecropper. But we didn't know we were poor. We didn't know that there was anything any different than other people. And we were amongst our families, our friends and neighbors. They were all Acadians. Our people are still speaking French. We're still cooking our cuisine. We're still dancing a jig. And we still can do and have what we have now because of their tenacity, because they could make do with anything.
How did you feel, and you as well, when you went, say, what we called we called it the French shore. When you went down the French shore, how did you feel to see all those Comoes, as I pronounce it, Comoe, and you pronounce it Como,
Yeah.
more like that, and Trahan is how we pronounce it, and it's
Trahan.
Trahan. How did you feel?
Well, we had the 1999 World Congress of Acadian in Louisiana. And 5 years later, in 2004, the World Congress of Acadian was going to be in Nova Scotia. It covered mostly all of Nova Scotia. Mm-hmm. So we came to the area, and I tried to call Trahans to see if they could gather enough people to have a reunion, because some of us from Louisiana wanted to come down. There might have been maybe 20 Trahans that attended the reunion. There was a lot of Légers, but out of the 20 Trahans, you probably had 12 or 13 of them were from Louisiana.
That's so neat. And how did you feel?
So I'm in 3rd grade, and we were never taught, about the story. My 3rd grade teacher was a Broussard, and she loved history. So she puts this weekly reader on my desk, and it said, Acadians, Nova Scotia. I'll never forget. What is that? And I was like, I have to tell my mother this. I got off the bus running with my weekly reader. I can still see how excited I was, and I showed it to Mama, and she said, I said, when I'm big, I'm going to Nova Scotia. I want to meet all the Comos. She said, oh, they're not going to want to know you. And she said, I said, Mama, you didn't know all about this? Why we speak French? And we Catholic, and all of the other kids in my class that are not Catholic and speak French, they're the Zamaricans, as my daddy say. But I'm from America, too. So I didn't understand all of that, and that's the only thing that I understood, because my daddy told me, he said, oublie jamais que t'es Acadien. And that, I guess that, it seeps into your blood, in your soul. You're never going to forget it. And I was determined that I was going to come, and I was going to see and signs of Comos, and I was going to be with as many Comos as I wanted. And it happened. Dreams do come true.
In St. Martinville, Louisiana, at the Acadian Memorial, we have an exact replica of this cross that was erected several years back. There's only one in the whole world, and St. Martinville, Louisiana has the replica. And we had a crane that had to take it over a 2-story building to come back and set it into place. But halfway through it, the back wall came out, and half of the cement went into the Bayou Teche, which is right next to it. So the next morning, we had to get another cement truck after we had reinforced the form, and we poured the cement, and we had our unveiling of it. But once it dried up, there is an area down on the bottom here where the bottom layer of cement has a crack at 45 degrees where the cold cement from the day before and the fresh cement on top of it did not join together. Yes. But when we came to Nova Scotia the following year, and we went and see the cross when it was next to the railroad track. It had the exact same 45-degree mark on it. So I'm assuming back whenever it was originally erected, they had the same problem that I had. That the wall had collapsed and the cement had drained out, and they had to come back and pour some fresh cement on top of that.
This has been really wonderful. I mean, the two of you are just precious, wonderful people. And I would love, though, if we all went up to the historic site. Would you be?
Yes, yes, we would
Yes,
love to do
definitely.
that.
Yeah, because I know we will find some just wonderful stories and facts there.
Great, thanks for inviting us there.
The time period that we talk about here starts quite early in the 1600s. 1604 is when we see the first French men arriving in what they would call the area of Acadie. It's about 100 men, and they come over with Samuel de Champlain, and they're here to do very basic stuff. Trading, fishing, and hunting, essentially. This is what they're here to set up to do at this point in time. In 1636 is when we start to see the first families arrive here. And there's 50 families. They're coming from the west coast of France. La Rochelle is the port. It's just outside of the town of what we call Poitou, France today. They're arriving here, and they're splitting up into two spots. Half of them essentially will go to Port Royal, and half of them will go to a place called Le Havre on the east coast of what we call Nova Scotia today. Acadie, or as the English call it, Nova Scotia, is in a really popular spot. It's halfway almost between Europe and the colonies further to the south, in the islands of the Caribbean and so on. Because of where it is, the European powers like to use it as a stopping place for boats. The ships that leave England or France will come over, stop in Nova Scotia, get fresh water, get food, and continue further on south. Or vice versa on the way back up. This means that both England and France want to control the area just because of where it is early on. In the first about 110 years of colonization here, it means that Acadie, or Nova Scotia, switches hands between the English and the French 7 times in war, which is the most of any colony throughout North America. In 1713, the English will take what they call mainland Nova Scotia for the last time. And so the Acadians find themselves stuck, where they don't want to anger the English because the English are in control now, but they also can't anger the French because based on how things have been going, it's very likely that the French will be back in a few years. And they're stuck in this middle point until 1755. In 1755, England and France know, okay, war is coming. We're ready. And this is going to be a war to control North America. And the English government in what is now, at this point in time, Halifax, in 1749 Halifax is created, is very worried, because at this point in time there's probably around 10,000 Acadians living in mainland Nova Scotia. There's thousands more spread out throughout the 2 islands and what we would call New Brunswick today. This is a huge population. And the English government worries that in the coming war, if the Acadians again choose to side with the French, they will be able to push the English government back out of the colony once more. And they take the decision that the only thing that they want to be able to do is to remove the Acadians from the colony. Now this leads to an 8-year period where the English soldiers go village to village to village to village to village, gathering up all the Acadians that they can, putting them on ships and sending them out of the colony. And they send them mainly to what we would call the 13 colonies. So these are the English colonies in what today would be called the United States. Now, the idea behind the deportation is to force them to assimilate. Stop speaking French and stop practicing your religion. Start speaking English, become Protestants. The idea of removing them from a French-speaking area and sending them to an English-speaking area is to force that to happen. And when the Acadians arrive in these colonies, they're split up even further into small groups and sent into tiny English towns. All in all, we see a huge shift in how many Acadians are deported. Now the numbers are a little bit sketchy because there's not very good documents kept in most areas, but the estimations range anywhere between 10 to 12,000 Acadians are deported on average, but we see numbers as high as 16,000 might have been deported, which at the time would have been the vast majority of all Acadians. So most Acadians are deported, which leads to a complete destruction, essentially, of Acadian society. Everything that they had here is now gone and has been given to English settlers. And so this leads to a very big issue of where do the Acadians go next? At the end of the 7 Years' War, England has taken pretty much all of North America. The only place that they don't gain control of is Louisiana. Louisiana at that point in time goes to the Spanish. The Spanish gain control in 1762. So right at the end of the deportation, the Spanish are getting control of Louisiana. The Acadians who have made their way back to France are invited by the Spanish crown to move to Louisiana, and the Spanish crown sends 5 ships to France to pick them up and bring them back over to Louisiana, where they're given land. They're told they're allowed to speak their language again for the first time in who knows how long. They're allowed to be Catholics again, and essentially they're allowed to set up for the first time. Now those Acadians who move to Louisiana will mix with the then French people who are already living there, with the Spanish people who are also starting to move in, and they'll create this completely new culture known as the Cajuns. But everybody of Cajun descent will draw their ancestry back here at some point or another. So it is this kind of change in what it was, but it's a drawing through the ancient culture to make something new in the form of the Cajuns of Louisiana.
Now, you touched on 2 key points that hit me. The families that started coming in 1636 was one of my 11th generation grandfather and his wife. He had 3 sons, and we all come, the Trahans all come from one of those 3 sons. The second point was in 1765. My 6th generation grandfather came to Louisiana to settle Louisiana at that time and lived there with all his cousins. So I got the 1636 and the 1765.
Oh, that's amazing.
It touches back on your history you just gave us, which is a wonderful, wonderful job. I wish we would have been taught that in school, but we never had that opportunity to learn.
Yeah, and even talking about the deportation, and this is one of the reasons that we talk about Evangeline so much, the poem written by Longfellow in 1847, is that it's the first time that someone who wasn't Acadian, or Cajun, essentially, took an interest in the story of the deportation. For a very long time post-deportation, Acadians were essentially told not to talk about it at all. Because most of them are living in areas surrounded by other English settlers, this is something that is essentially pushed down. And so the poem, being written in about 100 years almost after the deportation began, is written at a time period when Acadians are still really spread out, and there's not a lot of people who have ever heard their story, and there's not a lot of people who have ever talked about their story other than themselves. And the poem being written and just exploding in popularity, becoming probably one of the most popular poems of that century, really draws eyes to the story of the Acadians for the first time. And because the poem is set here at Grand-Pré, it makes this area a place where not only do the Acadians want to return, but it's also a place where many other people want to come to learn about the story of the Acadians.